Or we have a glass of water, and to me it's half empty, and to you it's half full. Even though it's the same glass of water. This philosophy is about perspective. And all around us, we are experiencing war. And when I say around us, I mean outside of us. If anyone listened to the talks at the UN security meeting that took place in New York, I believe, when Israel and Iran are talking about each other, it's frightening to hear the dialogue or lack of dialogue between these two countries. Or Black Friday is coming up. And every Black Friday, companies like Walmart have to take down their doors, like literally unscrew them and take them off, because if they don't, people will crush those doors and crush the employees underneath them. Or now in China, divorces are growing at an epidemic rate. Because for so many years they've had a single child policy. And now when these two single children have gotten together in a marriage, they've not learned how to fight and sacrifice and forgive, like some families do where they have multiple children in the family. So there's war all around us. And we have to ask ourselves, is this war inherent to the world? Is this war natural? Is this war a way of life? And some would say yes, war is inherent, war is natural, and war is a way of life. If we're living, then there's going to be war. And it's the people who think like this that are the same people who would fight tooth and nail for the right to bear arms. That it's more important to bear arms than to save people from the violence that comes with weapons. And that's why our scriptures are so beautiful. They don't focus on rights, they focus on duties. Rights is what do I get, duties is what can I give. No different than President Obama referred to John F. Kennedy recently in the apparent debate on foreign policy. So even Canadians enjoy laughing at American politics. And he referred to John F. Kennedy, and he made the famous statement, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That is a duty, not a right. Let's think about this even deeper. If you and I were happy, would there still be wars in the Middle East? If the people in Iran and the people in Israel were happy, would there be wars between them? If people were happy with the possessions that they had, would they fight on Black Friday to get this toy or this video game or this couch? If couples that are getting together are happy, would there be divorces? If there was happiness, would there be war outside? And if we think about it, the answer is no. If you and I were happy, all the world war around us would end. We are talking about traffic. If I'm driving on a highway and I'm happily driving, and someone comes up from behind me and flashes me with their lights, if I'm happy, what do? I get out of the way and let that person pass. If I'm unhappy, what do? Put my brakes on quickly and begin the game, begin the war, really. And then that person tries to pass me and I go behind them and I flash them. We call that road rage. But the only difference is if I'm happy, I get out of the way. If I'm unhappy, I engage in the war. Think about exams for those who are in school right now. If you've studied your best and you are happy with how much effort you put in, whatever the result is, you are more accepting of that. But if you're unhappy with how you studied, then whatever the result may be, you're unhappy with that too. And with our significant others, if we are happy with our relationship, do we look to another person? How happy will I be if I was with that person? Or that person is more beautiful, that person has a better personality than my significant other. It's only when I'm unhappy with my significant other do I look to another person to be my significant other. We know this in our own lives, and we see this a lot with kids. Kids who don't have as much responsibility as you and I do. I spent the last 3 days with a friend of mine, and they have a 8-month daughter who's turning a year old. And when you see her eat, it's madness, the way she eats. The way she grabs things and puts it on her face, and she drops it on her forehead till it gets into her mouth. And I was thinking that if you and I were in that circumstance, even if our hands are a little bit sticky, we want to wash them right away. When it comes to personal space, even when we go to see a movie in the theater, when we go with another person, we ask for there to be a seat in between. Just so I can put my legs out. But really, it's that thirst for personal space. Because I don't feel comfortable, so I want more space between. But with kids, they have no demand for personal space. They want less personal space. They want to be closer to others. And we see this with animals as well. Recently in Kentucky, or somewhere in the Midwest, there was a Down syndrome boy who was 10 years old. And he got lost. And so they had 150 volunteers that went through the forest to find him. And they heard this barking, just a series of barks that were coming from this area. And when they got there, they saw a group of wild puppies that had congregated where this boy was. And he was really KO'd at this point. He was hungry and he was thirsty and he didn't know where he was. And they were barking to get people's attention for him. And they were saved at that point. He was going to die shortly. And it shows that because that boy had no fear inside of him of the animals around him, that those animals had no fear of him. When you and I see a dog that's not ours, there's that fear that automatically kicks in. This conflict within gets projected outside. And the idea that I want to share today is, if we can make peace within, we can make peace without. This is the idea. If I dissolve conflict within, I dissolve the projection of conflict that naturally takes place. And this is where Swami Chinmayananda said, self-perfection leads to societal perfection. For those who study economics, where is society? Can you buy society? Can you go to society? It's just an abstract noun. A group of individuals makes up society. If individuals start being perfect, then the society starts being perfect too. But in a political spectrum, it's the exact opposite. They focus on making society perfect, but never working on themselves. But a spiritual leader will always focus on making themselves perfect, and that naturally radiates to the society around them. And I share this at a very intimate example of this. When I went to study in the ashram, Sandeepani Sadhanalaya, then I went in with the idea that an ashram is where everyone floats. And everyone's clothes are always clean, and there's animals that are all around. Just a dream place. And I went in with this notion. Being born and raised in Canada, I don't know what it means to live in an ashram. I don't know anyone who's lived in an ashram for a month, let alone for over 2 years. But when I got there, I realized that there's just as much jealousy and anger and frustration and everything that we see in society is in the ashram too. If it's in the macrocosm, it's in the microcosm. So if I change the microcosm, I also begin to change the macrocosm then. So the idea is, when I make peace within, I create peace without. And I think everyone in this room understands the logic, the rationale, the simplicity of the idea. But who talks about this? When we leave this room, when we go out into society, it's exactly opposite. Let's change society, change society, change society. But who wants to change themselves? I was watching a YouTube video by the ex-CEO of Citibank. And he's a vegan. And he was saying that if people, and I'm just putting the idea out there, okay? if the world consumed 10% less meat, they'd be able to feed 100 million more people. And there's 1 billion people in this world that are hungry, of which 20 million will die due to malnutrition. So his idea, and was the CEO of Citibank, so he's not someone who didn't go to school and doesn't know about the world. He's saying that if people stopped eating meat fully, no one would go hungry. But if we asked someone to change their lifestyle, there would be a huge revolt. It's better to put emissions tests in, and it's better to put this infrastructure and change this, but to change oneself, that is a radical idea that we don't want to touch. See the difference in perspectives and strategy. Okay, so this is the idea. Where do we begin? And we've already begun. The fact that you and I are here gathered to think about this, we've already begun. So point number 1 on how to make peace within our realities, think about the subject. Think about the idea. A thought is the most powerful creative force in this universe and the most powerful destructive force too. Someone who says, I will sacrifice my life for the world, Mahatma Gandhi, started with an idea. Someone who says, I will create a nuclear weapon to annihilate the world, also came from an idea. It is the most powerful way to create or destroy. This is the whole premise of the movie Inception. How a single idea can change the fate of so many. Inception is a beautiful depiction of the way the mind works. The different layers of the mind, how to use the mind. The mind doesn't know how not to do. When Arthur asks Sato, don't think about elephants. And then he asks him, what are you thinking about? And he says, elephants. That's why in the movie, when they first have the idea and they're saying they should try to make that son, the father dislike the son. But see how when they got deeper and deeper into the movie, it was, let the son be better than the father. They put a positive assertion there rather than a negative assertion. Because that's the way the mind works. He doesn't know how not to do. So think about the subject. And thoughts have 4 functions. And now we're getting into technical Vedanta, but I'll only focus on 2 functions. And you probably already know this. One of the functions of thoughts is decisions, decision-making. It's called Nishchaya Atmika, which is the buddhi, or the intellect. One of the functions of thoughts is to go in the direction of making decisions. That we call the intellect. And a common language we would call that our conscience. Our conscience makes decisions for us. Eating 1 cookie is right, eating 10 cookies is wrong. That's my conscience that tells me to make that decision. And what my teacher had shared about our conscience. He said the softest pillow is a clean conscience. When someone has made the right decision, it doesn't matter how soft or hard that pillow is, they sleep well. But when someone has made a wrong choice, then it doesn't matter how hard or soft that pillow is, they cannot sleep. Softest pillow is a clean conscience. And most of us know what is right and wrong. But the challenge is translating that into action. We know that we should wake up when the alarm clock goes off and go to the gym or read. But we just can't translate that into action. The same thing goes with eating. The same thing goes with studying. All of the discipline that we have in our lives that gets thrown away, it's because we know intellectually, but cannot manifest that into action. And Duryodhana says this so honestly. He says, I know what is right and wrong, but I just can't do it. And see where his life took him. He studied with Lord Krishna. He studied with all of the Pandavas, all of the Kauravas. He went to Rishi Sandipani, but he was unable to translate that. And that's why Duryodhana's focus was always on 100 brothers. What was Yudhishthira's focus? He said, we're not 5 brothers and 100 brothers, we are 105 brothers. See how he was able to translate that into action, unlike Duryodhana? That is the function of the intellect, which is decision. Now, another function of thoughts is doubts. In Sanskrit, it's called samshaya atmika. And this is the role of the mind. When the intellect has a decision, what does the mind do? Doubts that decision. Waking up is the best example of that. Why should I get up? It's too hot outside. Sleep some more. Why should I get up? It's too cold outside. Sleep some more. Whatever doubt. The doubts don't even make sense. But those doubts break down that decision. The mind has this endless dialogue. Even now, as you're sitting here, you're thinking, why did I come? Some people are thinking, oh yeah, I should have come. And that's the intellect that's holding on to that idea. That dialogue. One of our young adults put it as, the mind is a sentence that never ends. Right now we're thinking about the coffee and what's on his coat and what am I going to eat afterwards? I have to do this homework. And this seat is really comfortable. It reminds me of the Cathay Pacific seat. And then I went to China and I probably haven't even gone to China, but that's what I would think about. This endless dialogue. And this endless dialogue causes us to be inefficient and ineffective. Starting with studying. How much studying do we actually have to do, and how much studying, hours-wise, do we actually engage in? If we have an hour of studying to be done, how long does it take us? An hour and a half? 2 hours? Because while we're studying, what else is happening? I watched so many people. I sat there for an hour and a half on that bench because I came early. I chose to come early. And 3/4 of people I saw had headphones on. That rather than just walking, they wanted to listen to whatever is being listened to and walk, which really means they're not doing either of them. Because multitasking is a fallacy. But I'm sure you paid Boston University $35,000 a year to teach you how to multitask when it's not true. I did the same. I paid $20,000 a year to learn how to multitask, and it's not possible. You can only have one thought at a time. But the thoughts are moving so rapidly, it's as if we can multitask, and we feel good about ourselves. I do 10 things inefficiently at a time, but I feel good about myself. Lord Krishna talks about all of this. He says, the mind is like the tip of a flame. It looks like the flame is solid, but it's just moving so rapidly. It appears solid, like a tire that moves very quickly too. So studying, I'm just waiting for where it says Gmail instead of inbox. I just want that bracket to be filled in so I can be distracted and focus on that, or whatever else is happening. Then we become inefficient and ineffective with our sleep too. How long does it take us to fall asleep? By show of hands, how many of you sleep within 0 to 15 minutes when you lie down? 15 to 30. 30 to 45? 45 to 60? That's the mind that's doubting. Reasons to go to sleep. And waking up is no different. How inefficient and ineffective we become when it comes to waking up. When one's alarm clock goes off. Those reasons of why I should sleep in, why I shouldn't sleep in. How long does it take us to wake up? 0 to 15 minutes? Show of hands? 15 to 30? See, it's much harder to wake up than it is to go to sleep. That's the mind again. And especially when it comes to our sadhana. When we get up for meditation or to read or to do yogasana, to do japa, whatever we do. Even to come to the arati for Navratri. That sadhana, the mind keeps telling us you should be studying. Why go to arati? Why remember the Creator? Study. Economics is more important. And so on and so forth. Our scriptures so thoughtfully depict this dual function of thoughts, one being decision and one being doubts. And it's so apt because today is Vijayadashmi, and I'll explain some of the significance about that. when Mother Sita is in that hut with Bhagavan Rama and Sri Lakshmana. And what does she see run by? She sees that golden deer. Mother Sita symbolizes devotion. That deer symbolizes the mind, and Lord Rama symbolizes the intellect. When our devotion gets distracted from the intellect and goes towards the mind, away from decisions and goes to doubts, what happened then? She's lost. She gets taken away. So what we find from this, and this is not an inefficiency of Mother Sita, it's for us to learn to focus on the ideal, focus on the intellect, or the mind takes us away. Vijayadashmi. Dashmi means 10. Victorious on the 10th. How many heads did Ravana have? How many heads? 10. Can you sleep with 10 heads? Think about it functionally. Is it possible for someone to sleep with 10 heads? Many people find it hard to sleep on their side with 1 head. Imagine sleeping with 10 heads. And he had 5 wives too, so functionally, this is not happening. What these 10 heads symbolize is the 5 organs of perception and the 5 organs of response. This is what those 10 heads symbolize. And when those heads are in discipline, have any of you read the Prince of Ayodhya novels by Ashok Bankar? He's taken Ramayana, but written in a very Lord of the Rings style. It's excellent. It's called Prince of Ayodhya. Penguin, I think, published it, or HarperCollins, I'm not sure. And he talks about Ravana with his 10 heads, and he's saying that each of those 10 heads talks at the same time. So it's super confusing, because he just doesn't know what to do. It symbolizes those depths. Lord Rama has 1 head. That's that decision versus that depth. And Vijayadashmi is the day that the decision overtakes those depths. So for us too, we do Aarti and we say Happy Dashera and Happy Vijayadashmi, but what does it all mean? The application is in our day-to-day affairs. To focus on the intellect, the decision-making, rather than the mind, which is about depths. So that's Ramayana. If we shift to Mahabharata, first stanza of Mahabharata, the blind king, Dhritarashtra, asks Sanjaya, his messenger, Kima Kuruvana. He says, what happened? He never says what happens. He uses the past tense, ed, what happened. Why does he say that? The implication is that this Mahabharata is happening right now. Paramahansa Yogananda says, Kurukshetra is this body. Dharmakshetra is the mind. So Mahabharata is happening right now. And even Dhritarashtra with his blindness, he represents the mind. And he's born blind, and when he marries Gandhari, what does she do? She she's the intellect. When the mind is blind, what should the intellect be doing? Seeing more clearly and guiding the mind then. It's like I'm blind and I have a seeing dog that's blind too. Well, of what use is a seeing dog? So she, though a faithful wife, doesn't think in the right manner. So right now, the Mahabharata is taking place. What happened is important, but more important is what's happening right now. And further on, when Lord Krishna describes Arjuna's chariot, those horses, how many horses are there? Pop quiz. How many horses? Can you ride a chariot with 5 horses? Is it really balanced? Can you have a car with 5 wheels? They always go in pairs, other than 3-wheelers in India, now you're thinking. But typically, even when you leave the airport and you go through the toll, they say how many wheels you have, how many axles you have to pay more. But it's always in pairs. There are actually 4 horses. 5 is simply that picture that's shown, but 4 because the tongue represents taste and touch, both. Those horses run on a path. Those paths are sense objects. Eating, movies, radio, sitting on a chair, etc. Those horses represent the sense organs. The reins holding those sense organs represent the mind. And who's holding the mind? Lord Krishna, who represents the intellect. That chariot represents the body. Arjuna represents the represents the ego, and Lord Krishna represents reality. When Arjuna is giving Lord Krishna instructions, that's where the breakdown happens. But when Lord Krishna gives Arjuna instructions, that's where the rising up takes place. As long as Lord Krishna, who's the intellect, is governing the mind, who's Arjuna, things are well. But when the mind is governing the intellect, that's where that inefficiency and ineffectiveness takes place. So see the depth of our scriptures. They're not just pictures, they're not just stories. All of this is to be assimilated into our own lives. Is today really Vijayadashmi? If I'm living a life of discipline about decision, it is. If I'm not, then it's not Vijayadashmi. Ravana still lives at war within. The intellect's focus is to unite. And that's why in Gita, Lord Krishna says so many times Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi Yoga, Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi means Buddha, means wisdom. That's where the word Buddha comes from Gita. It means someone who's wise. And nirvana, all of these Buddhist terms come from Gita. Nirvana means blown out. And the idea is that flame of the ego is blown out with enlightenment. And even if one goes to the Experience Music Project in Seattle, the co-founder of Microsoft, when he was bought out, and he spent $1.5 billion on this museum in the center of Seattle, and he loved Jimi Hendrix, so it's in the shape of a smashed guitar. And they have a presentation on Nirvana. And Nirvana, the band, loved to break their instruments and blow out their speakers, hence the name, Nirvana. That's what Buddhi means. Buddhi means illumined. Yoga means to unite, to yoke, to join. So Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, think with wisdom. Act with wisdom. That's Buddhi Yoga. That is a philosophy. That's a way of life. That's how to be happy. Because if you're happier, then you will end this war that is happening inside you. Yudhishthira doesn't have this doubt. Yudhi Stiraha, the one who's firm in battle, is Yudhishthira. It's Arjuna who has the doubt. And you see how he falls apart. The mind's focus is to divide. Gender, race, species, economics, education. All the time the mind is focusing on division. And that's where we get into the comparison game. I always compare what I ate yesterday with what I'm going to eat today. My teacher in this class was like this, but now my teacher's like this. And so on and so forth. I was in Niagara Falls walking back to my car, and a girl came up to me and asked me if I had any money. Because she was asking for some. She wasn't trying to mug me. And I said, no. And she said, oh, you have some paint on your forehead. I was wearing my tika. And I said, it's not paint, it's sandalwood paste. Why are you wearing it? It's to remind me that you and I are one. No, we're not. We're not married. That was her response. This is why I wear a tika, a bindi, etc. It's a reminder to think with my intellect, not my mind. These eyes are my mind. They focus on division. My intellect focuses on unity. And there's a story that makes this more clear. There was a monastery with a great master. And this master was growing older, and finally he passed away. And as soon as he passed away, all of the ashramites, all of those people living in the monastery, started bickering with each other. And slowly, each person in the monastery started leaving. Now this master's friend, his Guru Bhai, he was passing through that city, and he stopped at the monastery. and asked one of the ashramites there, how are things going on since the master passed? And he was honest. He said things were falling apart now. No one is getting along, people are leaving. So that the master's friend called that person closer and whispered something in his ear. He said that, when the master passed on, he entered into someone in this monastery. And that's all he said, and he left. Now, one detail I forgot to tell you was this monastery was in India. So as soon as that person heard that, what did he do? He told another person. He told another person. The gossiping began. And soon everybody heard that one person in the monastery has that spirit of the master. Then, what happened in that monastery? Everyone started respecting each other. Everyone started empathizing with each other. Everyone was thinking that maybe this person's the master, maybe that person is the master. See that dramatic change when they focused on unity rather than division. On decision rather than doubt. Before they were doubting each other. Now it's been decided one of them is the master. And now all of those scientific people are thinking this is just a story. Even at a placebo level, it would still work. There are these benefits that come with focusing on unity. So hearing all of this, we are now inspired to make our intellect the lighthouse for our life. And to make sure that this lighthouse continues to shine brightly. Point 2 is to study our scriptures. Otherwise that bulb slowly becomes dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. Take to heart the message of the scriptures. The second month that I was in the ashram, our teacher, then he asked each person to come individually to meet him. And I was the last person because of my name. And I sat at his feet and he said, so Vivek, what's on your mind? And I said, Swamiji, I've never lived in an ashram, so I don't know if I'm doing anything right or wrong. And he laughed and said, if you were doing anything wrong, I would have told you. So first worry, God. Second question, Swamiji, how do I make this experience better? How do I be a better student? I've chosen to come here. How do I learn more? And he said, study the scriptures because they're a mirror to your personality. And initially I thought he was just saying that poetically, just because he didn't want to answer my question. But it's true. The scriptures are a mirror to our personality. Who is Prince Arjuna? All of us. Take this to heart, and this is the specialty of Chennai Mission really is. The Visheshana is the focus on knowledge. The focus on studying the scriptures to make sure that lighthouse, which is the intellect, is always illumined. Otherwise it slowly fades away. And we do this with our body. Before we come to go to work or go to school, go to a party, don't we look after our body? Take a shower, comb our hair, shave, brush our teeth, hopefully, and so on and so forth. But what do we do for our mind? What do we do for our intellect to get ready? This is studying the scriptures to make the mind, to make the intellect ready as well. Because the war is not happening at the body level. The war is happening between the mind and intellect. So I have to make the intellect ready to control that mind, to guide the mind. And this is where the 3 R's come into the picture. In an academic environment, what are the 3 R's? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. The 3 R's in the spiritual university is reading, writing, and reflection. 3 R's. Every day, before you go to class, before you go to work, before you go whatever you're doing, read for 5 minutes. Whatever you want, along the spiritual context, not to the phone book or the encyclopedia. 5 minutes, read positive literature, some book with a message. Then for 5 minutes, write about it. Keep a notepad and write your thoughts, write your question, write your observations, write poetry, write a story. Just write about what was read. I apologize. Read, write, yeah, write. And the last R is reflect. Then just close your eyes and think about what you read. Or go for a walk on the way to class, on the way to work, and just reflect on them. Read, write, and reflect. 15 minutes. This will help us fulfill point number 2, which is studying our scriptures. Which connects me to point number 1, which is think about the idea. And what is the idea? Winning the war within. You will be the most likable person. All of our masters, people love them. Like Swami Vivekananda. They gave him a standing ovation for 2.5 minutes. He slept in a garbage can when he got to Chicago. In a garbage can. Because it was too cold and he just needed something to protect him from the wind. He came with nothing. This standing ovation. Become the most likable person. Ramana Maharishi. You know, these people lived in jungles with scorpions and snakes and so on, but completely fearless. Because there's no war with them. They're not trying to hurt these animals, so those animals don't try to hurt them either. These are real life examples. These aren't stories that I'm just making up, random names that I've come up with in my mind. You can read about all of this. And collectively, when we do this, it helps us stay on track more. When I read, write, and reflect on the scriptures, sometimes I may not understand. That's the point of this satsang. Where if I don't understand, he may understand. If he doesn't understand, you may understand. So collectively, when people read, write, and reflect, that's even more potent. That's the chick bus. That's what they do. Read, write, and reflect. And we know this is true in the physical world. Boston has a full marathon or a half marathon? Full marathon? Okay. Have any of you ran the full marathon? You lived in this city and you've not run a full marathon? Anyway, so recently a group of us, 50 of us actually, ran the Chicago half marathon in September. And there's 12,000 people who ran that half marathon. More than 12,000. And what we were running, it's madness to run 21 kilometers for no reason, really. You're just running. But you see that there's 12,000 other people. One lady was pregnant when she was running. One boy was 8 years old. One lady who didn't run, but she had a sign that said, "Run, stranger, run." Chicago on a Sunday morning, she has this sign, just "Run, stranger." I don't know who you are, but run. See how collectively, then people finish the race. But if 12,000 people were to do that individually, not nearly as many people would finish the race, let alone get that healthy time. So doing it together. Now one more section of thoughts I'll share, and then we'll leave the last portion of this evening's satsang for questions. I was watching Parks and Recreation yesterday, and there's the episode of it where Aziz Ansari hits a fire hydrant because he's tweeting. Wow, have you seen that episode? It's pretty funny. He tweets as he's getting into the accident. Like he's tweeting and he goes, "Ah!" And so the judge says that he's not allowed to use any electronic device, meaning like with the internet, for a week. And he borrows someone's phone and gets into another car accident because he's tweeting about how he has a phone now. And when someone genuinely asks him, "What's with your infatuation with these devices?" he says, "Because I don't want to face myself. I like to distract myself because I don't want to face myself." And it's hard to receive that message from Aziz Ansari, but the point taken is that he doesn't want to face himself, and we're no different. When we go home, don't we turn all the lights on? Or turn the radio on in the car? Turn the TV on? Anything so I don't have to get to know myself. But we have to steady the mind. And when we do, we will learn a lot about ourselves that we don't know right now. And specifically, what is lurking in our minds. If I were to ask you, who are your enemies? What would your response be? I asked a group of kids this. One girl put her hand up. Priya and John. Our enemies are not enemies that live outside. There are enemies that live inside. And specifically in Vedanta, the Shadripavaha are 6 enemies. Universally, we have 6 enemies who are universal in their destructive power. What are those 6? Desire, anger, greed, delusion, arrogance, jealousy. Is there anyone in this room who is not suffering from desire, anger, greed, delusion, arrogance? My parents keep telling us we're arrogant, right? Jealousy. Jealousy is almost like just a specifically Indian disease. We have these 6 universal enemies, and I want to emphasize what these enemies do. They're universally destructive. It's shared that Kama means desire and Rama means joy. Wherever there's Kama, there cannot be Rama. Wherever there's desire, there cannot be joy. And wherever there's joy, there's no desire. Greed. Mahatma Gandhi said, there's enough in this world for every man's need, but not enough in the world for a single man's greed. Just one person's greed. And jealousy, it's called the green disease. Why? Because it makes one feel sick. You know, when someone says you look green or you look blue, it's because you're not feeling well. That's what jealousy does too. Our skin may still be brown or white, but inside we feel sick. I'm never at peace if I'm jealous of someone or jealous of an idea, whatever it may be. Study who lives in this mind. And I say in this mind because it's not our mind. A friend of mine, his mother she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and so she went to see a naturopath. And after the first session, that naturopath said, don't say you have breast cancer, say the body has breast cancer. Because you're more than your body. In the same way, we are more than the mind. How much time do we spend talking about the intellect? We are Lord Krishna, not Prince Arjuna. We believe we're Prince Arjuna, but our real nature is Lord Krishna. So point 3 is, practice evicting the enemy. The enemy lives in the mind, so practice evicting the enemy. And how? Deepavali is coming up. Deepavali is a new year. Lord Rama's return to Ayodhya. This is a new year. Pick one of these enemies that are living in this home, that is the mind right now, and make it a plan that this year I will focus on evicting this enemy. Whether it's jealousy or greed, anger, make it a plan. Because if we don't make it a plan, it's not going to happen. No different than January 1st, I'm going to be healthier. It doesn't happen. But if I say, I will go to the gym 5 times a week for 30 minutes, or I will only eat 2,200 calories a day, then it's possible. I make the idea real. If it's not real, I can't practice it then. So pick an enemy, evict that enemy. As we hear all of these thoughts on this idea, we have this sense of insecurity. No different than Prince Arjuna. In chapter 6, Lord Krishna so elaborately talked about dhyana, meditation. The original source of meditation, Lord Krishna. And after hearing all this, Arjuna starts telling Lord Krishna, this mind is distracted, this mind is delicate, this mind is dull. I don't believe that what you're saying is possible. And Lord Krishna's response to that is, he says, abhyasena. Through study and practice, he says, then shakya. It's possible. All you have to do as Arjuna is you need to study, you need to practice. This is shakya. That literally means possible. That's what shaknoti means, someone who's capable. Study, practice. For you and I too. In the long term, our only hope for making peace in the world is to make peace with it. I hope in the last 60 minutes, time goes by quickly, that this has become a more real idea rather than just a radical idea. And that is the flaw with politics, not just in America, but in Canada and most places in the world. People get a 4-year term. What do you want to do in 4 years? Just get votes. I'm not interested in what's best for the country. You can't make that change in a country in 4 years. So people act for votes, short term, rather than what's in the best interest of the nation. That's a long-term strategy. That needs to be fixed. So now we say, politics is to blame. But politics, like society, is simply us. We made the system. We can change the system. People wrote the Constitution. It didn't just magically appear. It's not the Ten Commandments, not the Vedas. We created the Constitution and everything that goes with it. Our only hope is to begin thinking in the long term. And that's why it's winning the war within, not winning the war without. That will happen naturally. But Swami Prakashananda had shared this joke. Many of you have heard it, and I've heard it so many times because I share it so many times, but I love it every time. So that's your problem if you've heard it already. So a man is getting his hair cut, and the barber sees in the window, in the mirror, that a little boy is walking outside of that barber shop. So he asks that customer, do you want to see how foolish this little boy is? And that customer says, if it makes you happy, sure. So he gets up, and the barber grabs a $5 bill and 4 quarters from his tip jar, and they both go outside. And that boy just walked by. So the barber calls him, little boy, I have something for you. So he slowly turns around, and the barber puts his hands out. In this hand, I have a $5 bill. In this hand, I have 4 quarters. And for those of you who are looking at my hand, I didn't put that stuff on that Bharatanatyam dancers put on. I was making tikka for someone yesterday. Because I know you're judging. That's what the mind does. So at $5 and 4 quarters, you can have what's in either hand, but not both. So choose wisely. So the boy's looking at the $5, the 4 quarters, $5, 4 quarters, $5, and then he takes the 4 quarters and scurries off. And that barber smiles, and that man says, yes, that boy was foolish. They both go back inside, he gets his hair cut. He leaves the barber shop, the customer now, and he sees that boy leaving an ice cream shop, just happily eating his ice cream. So he catches up with that boy. Little boy, why did you choose those 4 quarters? You could have had 5 times that amount if you chose the $5 bill. And he's just happily eating his ice cream. He doesn't, not interested in this man, but he keeps bothering him. So finally he looks up and says, if I chose the $5 bill, the game would have been over. Because every time I walk past that barber shop, I'd collect another $1. And another $1, and another $1. See that little boy, how he's thinking in the long term? And how much benefit he derives from that foolish man? Delayed reaction from everyone. Oh, I get it now. This is our only hope. And the idea is, make peace within, make peace without. Win the war within, win the war without. Point number 1 is, think about the idea. We will think about it for another 25 minutes or so. When you leave this room, keep thinking about it. Talk to your peers about it. Talk to your professors about it. See what they have to say. Let them put holes in it. Let them support it. Study our scriptures. Why? Because they're you. They're not for old people only. They're not for people who are from a specific country or a specific age bracket, income bracket. These scriptures are you and I. Want to know what our biography is? Our scriptures. It's already written for us. And point number 3 is practice evicting the enemy. That doubter, which is the mind doubts in these fashions. Anger, delusion, arrogance, etc. These only 6 enemies. They have a lot of friends. Lust, frustration, procrastination, etc. Evict an enemy. This is the way to win the war within. Do it for yourself. Do it for the person sitting beside you as well. Especially if they're your spouse, or sister, or mother. That's what I needed to share today. And we have approximately 20 minutes, so if anyone has any questions, I can try to share some answers. I may have them, I may not. Any questions from anyone? Like I said, I don't believe in awkward silences. I'll stare at you for 20 minutes now.
I have a question. So I looked into your background. So you said that you have an Ivy League background. So what do you think about ambition? Is it a vice or a virtue?
Our Baudelaire students, who are in junior kindergarten, they learn about the difference between ambition and aspiration. They go through the alphabet so far. A is for aspiration, B is for brotherhood, D is for daddy, and so on and so forth. Ambition tends to be focused on me. Aspiration tends to focus on we. So if I have ambition, it's better than not having ambition. Okay? It's better to have ambition than not have ambition. But better than ambition is aspiration. And I'll attach gunas to this. Gunas are qualities, or temperaments. A tamasic person, or someone who has a lot of darkness in their mind, in their personality, wants to do nothing. That's like Sunday when football's on. Let's just do nothing. Then, better than that is a rajasic person, that I want to build a company. I want to make a lot of money. I want a lot of people to know about me. That's better. But better than that is I want to serve a lot of people. I want to create wealth for other people. That is a peaceful temperament. So if you're a tamasic person, ambition is good. Continue with ambition. But if you're an ambitious person, evolve to be an aspirational person. And the best example of this is Arjuna again. He was a kshatriya. He was an alpha male. He was a warrior. He had a lot of rajas. Even to talk to Lord Krishna, he picked up his bow. He's right in front of him. Why does he have to pick up a bow? It's like you're sitting here and I put on my mic just to talk to you. A lot of ambition. And because it was not directed upwards towards that peace, towards sattva, he hit tamas harder then. He fell into delusion even more strong. So that's why we have to keep moving forward. If we don't, we will fall back. Next question.
I have a question. So I guess you were talking about this a little bit before. I'm the type of person where if I always have to have something going on at home. I live alone, which was maybe my biggest mistake, I thought, for a while, because I just get restless when I'm at home. I always have to have music or something, or I just feel lonely or whatever. And as my girlfriend points out multiple times, I don't think about myself, because when I sit down to try and think about myself, I get restless, and I mean, I like TV because I sit down and I get lost in TV. I don't think about life or whatever. I don't need to. So I guess my question is, where do we start to, or how do we start to think about ourselves? Like, I sit down and I try to do it, or I sit down and I try to meditate, but it's hard for me to think of that first question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we ask ourselves to learn about ourselves, as you were talking about? Get advice for that.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I tried to put this in the package of the 3 points. Think about the idea, which you're doing. Study our scriptures. They will help you, give you a pattern on how to go about this questioning process. And finally, when you find what lives in the mind, let it go, meaning the enemy. So practical advice on this, practical thoughts on this is, number 1, get involved with a forum where such questioning takes place. Whether it's a Hindu Civic Council, whether it's Acharya Vivekji, because that's all that's done. Questioning life, because if you don't question life, it's a ritual. And a lot of us have an aversion to ritual because we don't know what it means. But if you know what it means, if one really knew what Navratri means, it's beautiful. But if we don't, it's just another days that our parents like to talk about. So be part of some sort of forum where this is done, because you get training then. It's like you hire a personal trainer, but once you know how to work out, then you can start working out by yourself. So be involved in such a forum. Next, take up a simple scripture to read. And if you have some already, good. If you want some suggestions and some of the people sitting behind you can help out, Neil can help out, I can help you out with those scriptures too. Or questions like, who am I? Which is no different than the questioning that Neo went through. And there's lots of thoughts to offer on the Matrix in that regard. What is life? How was I born? What will happen to me when I die? And the most important question, if you want a question to ask yourself, is, am I happy? That is the most important question you will ever ask yourself. Anyone will ever ask themselves is, am I happy? So how you should go about doing it now is read and then go for a walk for 15 minutes. No headphones, no cell phones, no girlfriend, just you. And just ask the question and don't yes and then go home. Right? Think deeply about it. Just keep on thinking of every perspective. Do a 360-degree evaluation of that question. And the more you do it, the more it will become a habit, the more you will get answers. Like everything in life, it's habitual. You have to start the habit, though. And the fact that you, like all of us in this room, are so distracted is because we fear those enemies. It's like you and I, we live in our homes, and we know that there's someone in this part of the home, so we never go there. But it's not really my home then. I'm a slave to that home. Am I not? It's like the movie Panic Room. Right? I have no freedom to go to the rest of the house then. That should be more of a catalyst for you to spend time by yourself, getting to know who you are. And it will be difficult and frightening too. No different than someone who's addicted to cocaine or heroin and they go through detox. This detox is much more severe. This is the ego. That's the fabric of who I am. But it has to be done in the long term. Okay? Any other questions? So, yes.
Sorry. I was just thinking about what you were saying and how, like, you really have to analyze yourself and who am I and what am I doing. But just from what I've learned at, like, different Hindu, like, events and things like that, that getting closer to God would be removing that part of yourself and realizing that you're God yourself. Like, the whole, like, Jnana Yoga kind of thing. So where does this fit into, like, is this just a way of life that you're living, or is it, like, a path that you're trying to take? If you get what I'm saying, like, wouldn't questioning, like, who am I, separate you more from God or whatever?
Conversely, because right now I believe I'm the limited body, mind, and intellect, but when I question that, I move closer to my true nature. So it brings me closer to the Creator, God, nature, the self. And this is where Swami Vivekananda shares, don't worship Lord Krishna as Lord Krishna, worship Lord Krishna as yourself. So it brings one closer to the Creator. When I answer that question, am I happy? Most likely I will say yes for these reasons. Because of my health, because of my home, because of my job. But my health, home, and job will not be around all the time. So I start to grow independent of them. And that's moving me closer to my true nature, which is joy. And that's why Lord Krishna is known to be the one with Jnana Mudra. This is called the Jnana Mudra, or the indicator of knowledge. Body, mind, intellect, ego, my nature. Most of the time, even naturally, my index finger hangs out with my body, mind, and intellect. But the person who's a seeker begins to question, am I my body, am I my mind, am I my intellect? And starts looking inside, even to move my hand inside, my finger, finally realizing what my true nature is. And then I reunite with my nature, which has no beginning and no end, like a circle. And what's so beautiful about this is I start becoming more responsible then. Whenever I'm unhappy, I blame you. I blame you. I blame this university or the city, the weather. I want to move to California. I shouldn't have moved to this city in the first place, etc. But the person who's a seeker, they start taking responsibility for their joy or sorrow. If joy, I worked hard for this. Sorrow, I need to work harder. So that is where the questioning helps me to be responsible for my life. When I question a ritual, if I don't try to find the answer, I'm arrogant then. I question the ritual, but I don't find reasons to know the ritual. But if I question the ritual and it helps me pursue the understanding of that ritual, then I'm a cultured person. So it makes one closer to the Creator.
So it's cool that we're all here, but there are a lot of people out there who are, lost in their own worlds. I mean, is it any of our responsibility to bring them there? And if so, then how does that process take place?
In chapter 3, Lord Krishna says, don't shake those who are not ready to be shaken. He's telling Arjuna that. First thing he tells Arjuna is, as the wise person does, the world follows. No different than what I've said here too. When we win the war with them, then the world will win the war as well. And knowing that, but then he follows up saying, don't shake those who are not ready to be shaken. Each of us has a different mental temperament. And our focus should be on changing ourselves. And if you change yourself, you will naturally radiate that to the people around you. When you're happy, the people around you smile more. When you're unhappy, people are not happy there. That's the best service we can do, is just practice being happy. So we should not make it an agenda to change the world. Our only agenda item should be to change ourselves truly, because then we will radiate that outwardly. Because as long as we try to change the world and not the society but not ourselves, it's fleeting, it's temporary. It's building a house on sand. It will be up there for a little while, but then it'll just be broken down. So that's the Lord's teachings in that regard. And when we do change ourselves, that's why I use the word truly. If you show people that you're happier, they'll want to do what you're doing. It's that simple. My father had told me this when I came back from the Vedanta course. He said, you know, if you're unhappy when you come back, you're going to be doing the greatest disservice to the Vedanta course. And not because I'm lying about my happiness now. Don't think like that. But truly, think about it. If you came to Boston University and you have a law degree and you don't get a job, then what does that say for this institution then? Sure, there are many more variables, but automatically, yeah, this is not a positive experience. But if you go to Yale and get a law degree and get a job right away, then it's a positive experience there. So you have to truly embrace that change with you. Yeah? And in this, there's never a need to judge. We get lost in judging others, which is why we take other people's judgment more seriously too. Because you're here, great. Because people are not here, also great. But if I sit in this room thinking, I'm better than those people, or those people think they're better than me, and I take that seriously, then that's the doubt. I've identified with the doubter, and I will just be rocked all over the place. Swami Tejamananda once shared, the best service we can do for the world is mind our mind and mind our own business. So just let us mind our mind and let the world fix itself. I should just fix myself. Anyone else?
You spoke about consciousness and the best pillow, soft or hard, is a clean conscience. And the example you gave was about the brownie or the cookie, sort of this bad, good. And at the same time, there's something about judgment too. If we try to free ourselves from judgment about whether we're good for being here or somebody's bad for not being here, could you talk more about how consciousness fits into that and what that means?
Sure. The word I used was conscience.
Conscience.
Yeah. Conscience in the sense that this is my lighthouse to know this is the right direction and I won't hit the rocks, and this is the wrong direction, I will hit the rocks. Consciousness is the life principle that's enlivening all of us. And my conscience is what guides me to think rightly and act rightly. And when I think rightly, I will naturally act rightly. And if I do the right thing, then I will not engage in judgment nor fear judgment. It's whenever I think incorrectly or wrongly and act wrongly, then there's always fear in my mind. And examples of that is cheating. If I cheat in an application, if I cheat on a test, or stealing, telling a lie, being unfaithful, whatever that wrong thinking, wrong action is, I can never be at peace with that. I just keep thinking and thinking and thinking about that. It's like the movie, or that play by Edgar Allan Poe, where that person is buried underneath that room and it just keeps on. I only know that because it was a Simpsons episode. I've never seen the play or watched the movie.
Telltale Heart.
Okay, yes. So, but he just keeps thinking about, or that he or she just keeps thinking about that person that's underneath there. That's not a soft pillow. When I do what is right, and that is a soft pillow, my conscience, which is my intellect, helps to calm the mind down. It's stronger than my mind. But when my conscience is engaged in the wrong activity, the mind has become more powerful and it just keeps moving. I can't sleep then. I can't be at ease. The last thought we have before we go to sleep is, I want to sleep. And when that thought goes away, what has happened? I am sleeping. When the intellect is weak and the mind is strong, I have a lot of thoughts. So I'm not unable to sleep. But when the intellect is strong and the mind is conditioned, meaning conditioned in the right direction, then I'm able to fall asleep right away. That's having that strong conscience. Is that all right? Did I offer more thoughts, or
Yeah,
did
I think
just
the
share
part
randomly?
the part I get stuck on is the right and wrong, because I have this sense that we bind ourselves to judgment, in the sense that, I mean, I understand, maybe I misunderstand you, but when you speak about whether we're right or wrong for being in the room, it sounds like you're letting go of judgment. But when you talk about right or wrong of doing something correctly, and there being absolutes, it sounds like we're bound to judgment again.
Sure. Okay, now I understood the question more. It's known as Shastra Anusari. How do we know what we're doing is right or wrong? When it's in accordance with the scriptures. Because what are the scriptures? And I don't want us to think there's some esoteric writing. It is the life and teachings of people who have reached enlightenment. They've thought right, they've acted right, and so they've achieved enlightenment. They've tuned into that absolute state. So when we do that which is in accordance with the scriptures, that is right in my own personal sense, in the sense that this will bring me long-term peace. And if I do that which is prohibited by the scriptures, then it's leading me to pleasure. And wherever pleasure is, pain follows. It's a very short-term vision. So in that, there is judgment, but it's not judgment outside of me, it's judgment inside of me. It's for my own development. I should judge myself. These enemies we talk about them being bad. That is a judgment, but so is, an old cookie is me judging that cookie. Not that this is, but if that was old, that's me judging it, and that helps me to better myself. But judgment that's not productive, that is what we need to let go of. In Vedanta, the word is viveka, which means discrimination. And it says we should discriminate. But not discriminate amongst race and gender and wealth and so on, but to discriminate between what will bring me real happiness and what will not bring me real happiness. That's encouraged. That helps me live more intelligently, more efficiently. So it depends on the context of the judgment. Most of the judgment we're engaged in is futile. And we suffer and other people suffer too. But if we make our judgment not functional but fundamental, this is real, this is unreal, this is joyous, this is not joyous, that helps me grow then.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Quick question from anyone? We'll conclude.
This may not be a quick question, but you can try it. So you can cut it short if you need to. But you
I will.
mentioned, so when people are praying to Lord Krishna, they may want to pray to themselves, or kind of also talking about the role of religion with our scriptures and our faith. So could you expand upon that as to what's practical when it comes to living our scriptures every day in terms of the rituals? Because I feel as if sometimes there can be a divide between the spirituality and the practicality, or rituals is not what I think.
Sure. Spirituality is a contemporary word. It's a word we came up with because we have an aversion to rituals because we don't understand them. Part of the fault is ours, part of the fault is the people doing the rituals who don't. They themselves don't know it, and they don't teach anyone about those rituals as well. So it both ways. I shouldn't just point the finger up, nor should I just feel the finger is being pointed down at me. It goes both ways. Religion is philosophy and practicality, or theory and application. That's what religion is. The philosophy is Vedanta, which we're discussing right now. The application is ritual. The philosophy is there is a creator. The application is me worshipping an idol, which represents the ideal to help me know the creator. Because my mind can't think of the infinite, but it can think of a name and a form. So it is an application-oriented system to connect me with the philosophy or the theory. That is religion in its purest form. And that's why I encourage everyone to begin thinking along those lines. Otherwise, religion will die and only spirituality will thrive, but that's only a component of the big picture. So spirituality, based on our understanding, is philosophy, and religion is the rituals, but they're not separate from each other. Now, what to do with all of this? The more, as I think, so I become. So the more I think about the philosophy, the more it will slowly percolate into me practicing that. The more I think about you and I being one, the more I will practice that. How? I will start to see you're more than just a girl. That you're a human being. But I have to think about it a lot before that will actually manifest. That's why the first point I said is think about the idea. When it comes to the actual rituals, Navratri, Deepavali, Mahashivratri, etc., always study that ritual and the background of that ritual in the context of you. How do you fit into that equation? Mahashivratri, for example, is the appearance of the infinite. Okay? So that is the day that I should sacrifice all of my limitations and dedicate it to the infinite. That's why fasting is encouraged. On that day, I should not engage in anything that is limited, and I should only have my focus on the limitless. Deepavali means a row of lights. And all of these lights are lit by the first original lamp in one's home, in one's altar. I take that lamp and I light all the other lamps with that one light. No different than the Creator has one light and lit all of us with the same light, didn't He? So that should be our attitude when it comes to the rituals, putting myself into the context. And that will become more and more easy the more we study our scriptures. That's why I put that as one of the points too. Otherwise, I'm outside in the circle and I'm looking in the circle and I don't understand it, so I judge it and come up with my own circle. But these are the life and teachings of the enlightenment. So you study and encourage those who are doing the rituals to teach as well. Sure. We shall conclude with our prayer, and I express my gratitude to all of you for being here for a full 90 minutes, and for the Hindu Students' Council for giving me this opportunity to think about these thoughts and share these thoughts, and for Acharya Vivekji of Boston, who made this connection happen, and for being here. They're like groupies. Everywhere you go, they come. That's the grandness of this family. Like tomorrow when I speak in Andover, then there's a family from Iowa City that is flying in, to be part of that. And like I said, Shidam is in Washington, D.C., and he's coming to Pittsburgh. It's just the grandness of the family. So it's really moving to be in the presence of so many great people. Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om